Hey now, cats, we're back again this week on the Balls from Ellwood show. And with me today, I have a very special guest. Xtina and I is a huge fan of his work, and we just had to get him on the show. So please give it up for the most shadow banned cartoonist on Meta, Mr. Jesse Duquette. How you doing, man?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
I'm good, man. Before we delve into your amazing work, sir, and your work, I do believe is something that is very important that we need right now with all the fucking insanity and chaos going on. You are the voice of reason in a very dark time, sir, but we're going to get to that. What I wanted to actually start off with, I wanted to delve into, a little bit about you and how you started out. Where did you grow up, man? Where you come from?
I grew up in the middle of Connecticut, right south of Hartford. And yeah, born and raised there, and then moved to Boston when I was about 18. Spent a year in art school and then lived there for the next like 30 some odd years or so before eventually landing here in Chicago about a year and a half ago.
Well, let me ask you, at what age did you find your passion for art?
Well, I mean, I guess I would say that I started drawing when I was probably around three. Uh, it's just something, it sounds like a kind of a trait thing to say, but as soon as I could pick up a pencil, that's all I did. Um, Literally, I mean, just page after page, just kind of like scribbling. And I mean, I kind of obsessively did that since I was about three or so. So I've always just drawn because it's just the thing that I have always enjoyed doing. So, I guess I consider myself lucky that I found this thing that I enjoy doing. Not that it's like a vocation or a monetary payoff, but just the thing that I enjoy doing above, pretty much all else.
Are you from an artistic family?
Yeah, I mean, my dad draws. I mean, I would say there's a couple people in my family who do have like an artistic ability for sure, but I would say it's more a family that was a big like appreciator of the arts. So, growing up from a young age on, we'd go to museums, and so I always had this great interest and respect for the arts, sort of broadly speaking. So in that capacity, I would say yes, like pretty artistic, a family that really appreciated and valued uh, art. I would say.
So once your family seen that you had a knack for it, did they support your enthusiasm?
Yeah, they always encouraged it. They always were, very, always, buy me art supplies for sure, and were completely behind me going to art school. I think they recognized from a very young age that that was probably what I was going to do anyways. So they've always been supportive. I mean, for a large chunk of like pretty much the entirety of my 20s, I didn't draw at all. I was playing in bands,
Hmm.
and they were huge proponents of that. They've always been very supportive of sort of any endeavor like that I've had, whether it's art or music. And um, but yeah, art for sure. They're big supporters of the stuff I do now, of course. But yeah, definitely big supporters.
What kind of kid were you growing up? Were you like introverted, or were you popular? Hmm.
Well, I mean, I guess I was sort of introverted by default. I was an only child, so
Come
and
on.
yeah, and so drawing was kind of like I wouldn't call it I think maybe in the past I might have called it a coping mechanism, but it was just the thing. I genuinely enjoy doing it. So if I was alone in my room drawing for 7 hours, I was not lonely. I loved doing that. I would say when I was younger, especially in my teens and 20s, I definitely would not have called myself an introvert. It was very much very social, out and about and everything. That changed as I got a little bit older. I got a little bit more social anxiety creeping in, but
I get that.
yeah, for sure. But no, I mean, I I would qualify myself as, you know, a pretty outgoing kid. I had always had a pretty, solid friend group and, like-minded individuals. And, I was pretty lucky that way that I always, I mean, I think in the school I grew up in, um, I was, there was a lot of bullying when I was in like, say, elementary school and middle school a little bit. And high school was a little different. Like my school was a little weird in that the kids that were the popular kids were both the like top athletes, but also the kids with the best grades. They kind of straddled both worlds. And so I think they appreciated that I was like the artist in the class. And so
Hmm.
they kind of gave me a wide berth for the most part. They didn't really bother me too much. They appreciated that I had a sort of role within the high school cosmology, I guess.
Was there a defining moment that you realized art was going to be more than a hobby for you and become a huge part of your life?
Um, well, I mean, I guess I would say I don't know. It's been a really organic process. I mean, I would say it's still very much a hobby. I mean, it's what I do in my spare time. So I spend the majority of, if not all of my spare time doing it, but it's still very much I would qualify as a hobby. But I think I really began drawing a lot when the first Trump administration came along, and I think there it was a real quick response to the drawings I was doing. Um, and so it became apparent that it was going to become perhaps a bigger thing than I would have ever considered it would be. I mean, the fact that I'm even talking to you is something that's like a surprising thing to me. Anytime someone would want to invite me on something like this, I find it highly surprising. So it's been like it's a slow it's been a sort of slow burn of me kind of realizing and recognizing it, but certainly with the first administration and starting to do the drawings, then it kind of picked up steam. I went from being like, anybody just drawing random drawings and posting stuff online to, still doing that in very much the same regimen that I do it even today. But all of a sudden there was like people who were, paying attention to it, which was completely not uh, not the plan. It just kind of happened. And so I guess I would say, over this period of time, it's become like a thing that I guess it's become a bigger thing than outside of myself, even like I still feel like I have good control over it, but it definitely has like a life of its own outside of me.
What artist inspired you or influenced you growing up, and has your taste changed as you got older?
No, I mean, I actually, the artists that I was first enamored with are exactly the same artists I love now. Like, I'll preface this by saying my least favorite kind of art is political art. I'm not a fan. I do not like editorial cartooning. I find it, for the most part, it just doesn't do anything for me. So I also find it really strange that I'm doing this because I've never been it's not something that's ever resonated with me for the most part. Like, for me, the only political art that I ever really, uh, I guess, that ever moved me or whatever, that I took notice of are the things that are actually kind of more, it sounds so basic, but it's like Guernica, Picasso's Guernica, or, paintings by Goya, like, because those are like visceral and they're scary and they're dark. And, most political art is not so much that, which is fine. That works great for a lot of people. It's just not really my thing. So the artists that I first became, that really motivated me to keep going are the ones like, so Shel Silverstein, R. Crumb, Burke Breathed, the guy who made Bloom County, was a major influence. I mean, Mobius, Jean Giraud, who did a lot of work for heavy metal, and some like Marvel stuff as well. But I mean, those are the same artists that I would still say are my top favorite artists today. I mean, I don't, I'm also have to admit, I'm not, and this is not something I would say I'm proud of, but I don't really like, seek out a lot of stuff either. Like, I'm not someone who's like pays attention to a lot of it. Not for any reason other than I find I don't have, a lot of time. Like, if I'm not drawing, um, if I'm like looking at anything or doing any kind of research on anything, it's about music. It's not about art. I just can't even devote any more of my headspace to that. So I just kind of stay in my lane with what I'm doing, I guess.
What would you say is the easiest and the most challenging thing about creating a political cartoon?
Getting in your own way. I think the second you start to overthink it, it's over. I think I've always tried to go about every drawing I do, and I'm not an advocate for this approach. It just happens to work for me, and it doesn't always work. But for me, in order for me to do it, it has to be this sort of immediate idea. Like I had, whatever, if something, if I read about something or a news item and I realize like I feel like there's something about this that I want to draw, I try to clear my head entirely, and whatever the very first immediate gut response I have, like that's what I try to draw, and I try to not let anything else in, because I think that that's, if you start to modify or you start to think about like, oh, how will people feel about this? Or, if you start to self-edit, uh, or rather, let me change it. If I start to self-edit, I feel like it gets watered down
Mm.
and you kind of lose the thing that makes, for me, art interesting in the first place. Whatever, it's like, I've always said for especially visual art, it's this rare opportunity to like look inside another person's head, like what's going on in their head. Like, I think that's a fascinating and intimate thing. And the minute other things start to come in and inform that, it lightens that a little bit. It becomes less distinct of what that person is trying to say, I think. At least for me. Again, I would not ever try to put that in anyone else's mouth or say that would be advisable for them. That's just how I see it, I guess.
So most of your art is reactionary to like things that you see.
I would say for the most part. I don't know. I mean, I don't know that I'm sure there's some stuff I've done where it's not something that hasn't provoked me to draw it, but I guess it's also hard to say because like in this time we're in right now, I feel like it's sort of this ceaseless barrage of things that are provoking a reaction. It's almost unavoidable, So it's, if there was a time or if there's moments where something just sort of occurs to me that's not, a response, I feel like there's so many other things that I am being emotionally responsive to that supersede those things. It's distracting, I guess.
And let me ask you this: is there anything that you won't poke fun at in your cartoons? Is there a line?
Mm, I don't know. I never really thought about it. I think my first answer is no. I don't know what would be off limits. I would say during the first Trump term, I didn't really ever poke fun at Barron because he was a kid. I also knew that he would probably turn into a total shit. I mean, his last name is Trump, but whatever. He's a kid. Like he's just there's more than enough targets out there, and you know, um, I'm not gonna do that. But I don't know that there's anything, you know, I think it's not so much topics that I'd avoid. I think it's the the sort of approach, like meaning I've seen a lot of cartoons that are like say anti-Trump cartoons that go after his like his weight or something like that, which to me is just so there's so many other things. It's
Yeah,
like
it's kind of
that
low
kind.
hanging fruit. There's so much more to
Yeah.
even get, to dig into.
The only time I think I've ever brought that up is when he has, because this has happened so many times, where he talks about, like, I think he's described himself as an amazing physical specimen. Anytime he tries, like, those kind of things, like, okay, come on, like, give me a break. We're at least got to operate in reality here. But otherwise, no, there's no topic. I think it's more just sort of, uh, you know, you know, directions that you could take that to me are just like not that aren't, I guess they're just not funny to me. That's why I would avoid them. Whether they're offensive or not, that's a whole other thing. It's more just I just don't find it funny. It's the same thing with like Lindsey Graham, another person who's I think walking low-hanging fruit. He's just so easy to mock. And it would always bug me when people would, in the comments or just even in other cartoons make fun of him, intimating, his supposed closeted homosexuality, all these things. And it's like, if that's true, like, why is that the point? Like, there's so many other things about this guy, like why that, and it's these kinds of things that are like, it's lazy. And it's I think a wrong approach. So those are the kind of things I will avoid, not so much topics, but just more like the specific what you're attacking someone about.
As I said in the intro, Jesse, I actually discovered your work through my wife, who came across your cartoons, I think on Instagram, and it turned me on to your work. I can't stress to you how important I think your work is in this age and time, because
Oh,
humor,
thanks.
I always think, is a very reflective, always been very reflective society, and I really believe in what you're doing. And I know it's trying to reason with the, unreasonable is almost impossible, as you know. But
Yeah.
what I wanted to ask you is, have you ever had any like rough interactions with like critics of your work? I mean, I'm assuming the Kool-Aid cult followers try to fuck with you all the time. How do you
Yeah.
handle that situation normally?
Oh yeah, I mean that's oh, yeah, all the time, all the time. I think when I before my when I had my last account, before that got deleted, I had a pretty good policy of just avoiding the comments. And it was easy to do because, that that was a pretty large account. So there was just so many comments and so, there was, and so it became untenable to even try to pay attention to any of it. So it was easy for me to avoid it. I just like never looked at it. So avoidance was key, I think, for that. However, I'm human, and if someone leaves a dumb comment, sometimes I'm like, oh man, I got to go at this motherfucker. Um, and the thing is, it's never criticism. Criticism is fine. Like I'm very open about the fact I am not I'm not a trained or schooled artist. I do my work in a very kind of sloppy way because again, like the way I mentioned of how to me it's sort of immediate and I have to draw. I've often said that a lot of the time I'll have an idea for a drawing and it's almost like I'm wearing a hair shirt. Like I have to like do it really fast and I can't really relax until it's done. So again, not a great approach because that ends up being a lot of it could be really sloppy, but I just can't. It's just sort of how I've always gone about it. So again, if someone's critiquing the execution, if they're critiquing the skill, like that's all completely fair game. But it's more, what is really more the kind of commentary or negative feedback like that is more people just trolling and saying totally wildly ignorant stuff. And sometimes people will say something that's just so, I mean, constantly just stuff that's wildly uh off base, not even anywhere in the scope of any semblance of reality. And it's very hard to not take the bait. I really try not to. I really try to avoid interacting as much as possible because it's completely pointless. There's very few things that are more pointless than engaging with people in the comments. But hey, I'm human, you know, sometimes it's hard. I can't resist.
Is there anything that stands out in your mind as to being the stupidest comment that you've ever read?
Oh my God. Um, uh, I really, honestly, I couldn't. Oh boy, that's a really good one. I really wish I had cataloged some because there have been some real doozies where it's just like, man, I don't even know where to begin with this one. You know, I think I can't think of anything specific. What I can say just sort of generally about the comments, what I've noticed since sort of coming back with the new account, which, you know, because the last one got deleted right before the election. Um, and so, you know, it's been sort of like building up over time. And one thing I have noticed is the comments are a little different than they were before. Um, they're more negative, which is interesting because the account I have now is like a quarter the size in terms of like say followers and reach of the old one, but there's way more sort of negative MAGA activity, which I think really speaks to how the platform's changed. You
Mhm.
know, it to me just engaging on say and Meta specifically, it's very very different. It is, you know, so much more cluttered with right-wing wildness. Um, and whereas the first 4 years of Trump were people who were, even though they won the election, like they were the winners, but they were still angry, you know, because I think you know, that they knew that people really hated the guy. They knew that he didn't win the popular vote, so they, you know, they can deep down they knew their guy still lost in that way. Um, Now it's different. There's like this real sort of like almost bloodthirsty gleefulness, and even more disconcerting, it's skewed a lot younger, whereas before it was like very much like older dudes.
Mm.
Now it's like young kids, like, you know, barely able to vote. Um,
That's disheartening. Mm.
yeah, it really is. It's that, you know, it's a really, really depressing change that I've noticed. And like also along with it, way more openly awful. Like I can't recall how many times in the past, you know, 4 months or however long it's been now, people just openly, you know, putting out like pro-Nazi comments, you know, just and like it's stuff that would have seemed like even in this day and age beyond the pale half a year ago, even though people have always sort of engaged in that, just the sort of confidence, I guess, has changed with commenting in that way. So, I mean, that's more what I've noticed, I guess, you know, and there's no shortage of like the really inane, stupid comments for sure, that are so easy to mock. Unfortunately, they're also peppered with a lot of just like genuinely evil shit that's made that much more awful, knowing that they're coming from young guys, you know, which is super scary.
Yeah, I can never understand like what the appeal is to the young generation. I don't know. I guess I'll never get it because I'm not an asshole.
I think I don't, you know, I don't know either. I think it's because you have this generation or, you know, a part of the generation that was very online. And so it's sort of this ecosystem
Mm.
that is bred for disinformation and misinformation. You have a lot of these like totems on there, the Andrew Tates, like Tim Pool's, these guys who traffic in this, you know, some would call it like toxic masculinity, but I would qualify it as just like clownish. It's like a sort of a fake mask, this sort of fantasy masculinity that can be appealing, I guess, to a kid that's not interacting as much. I mean, you also are talking about this group of kids that were like the COVID generation, so this sort of stunted social thing going on for a minute there. But I don't know. It's a real disheartening reality. And I think it's also interesting that there is a very big, I mean, comparatively a gender divide there too. Like you can't necessarily say the same thing for young women of the same age. Like they're not, I mean, there's, I think younger people in general are a little bit more conservative, but you're seeing it so much more on the male side than on the female side.
I always find it interesting too that like the most ungodly, like evil dude in the planet got all the like, you know, all the quote unquote hypocristians all fired up about what a religious duty is. I'll never
I know,
understand that either. I mean, it's
I know.
fascinating to
Well,
me.
well, and that's, I think you've seen people like this before, people who take the mantle of Christianity when like, boy, these are like the least, and I'm like a total atheist, but at least I know generally what the whole I know what the bag is about, and you've seen people like this before, but I think that just goes to where a lot of American Christians are coming from, which is it's about power. Like who's got the power? What's my access to power? That guy, great. Doesn't matter. They're riding that horse to power. Doesn't matter what he's about. Doesn't matter that he's been married however many times. He's cheated on all his wives. He cheated on his second wife with his third wife. All it doesn't matter. It's immaterial because it's an end. It's a means to an end. But yeah, I mean, it's like so many things. It's the height of hypocrisy for sure.
So essentially, he's the golden calf.
Yes, yeah, golden
A really
ass. Yeah,
dumb, ugly, adultering. I could go on
yeah,
all day, golden calf. An orange
yeah,
calf.
exactly. Yeah.
Well, let me ask you, Jesse, what do you think is the best way that we could fight fascism? What can people do to fight and change the way, the direction that things are going now?
Oh boy, I don't know. I feel like I'd be put on a list if I'm
Well, I
transparent.
mean,
You know,
without the obvious one that's going to both get
I
us,
mean, let me
this
put it
was
this
going to
way.
probably put us in black
I,
vans.
I yeah, I think that, you know, I think that Americans um have been inured to how to motivate real change. I think, you look at, for example, and I'm not saying this is a total analog, but you look at how people operate in these sort of circumstances when in other countries where the government is undertaking something awful, and the working class, the lower classes recognize that the levers of government are not going to save them. That's not what they're there for. Look at France. When they tried to raise the retirement age by 2 years, those fuckers like came out en masse and they changed it. Like, I mean, it was destructive. They burned a bunch of shit down, but it happened. And I think that there was this. I know I'm people much smarter than me will know what I'm talking about. And I'll probably get this wrong, but there was this fascinating social experiment from a long time ago where this guy did experiments with mice and all different kinds of experiments with mice. And the one experiment that was the most fascinating was he got a bunch of mice and he put them in what was sort of like a perfect environment where there was no shortage of food, no predators, no nothing. It was sort of like a utopia. And what happened was, without any food scarcity, without any natural predators, it was sort of this really, great copacetic environment. Violent social cliques started, hoarding food. Mice started like killing one another. And I always think about this social experiment because, in a way, you could make a comparison to America where, like, there's definitely scarcity for a lot of people, for sure.
Mhm.
But for a lot of people where there's sort of this, like, uh, generally speaking, in abundance, or there isn't there's access to generally the things you need in life, and I think that has bred some complacency, and people will expect you know uh, government to to work for them. And I don't think that was ever entirely true, but I think it is obviously not true anymore. So I don't think the answer is any one thing. I don't think it's voting alone. I think, I'm not also the person who's totally down on voting. I'm like, oh, voting doesn't matter. I mean, like, I think you could make a case in any number of ways with that. Like, I'm also not naive enough to think that that's the thing that's going to save democracy, but on its own. But I think the best indication of what I've seen recently in this country, at least that comes to mind, of people making a change is in 2018 when the Senate went into recess. and their intention was to come back and repeal the ACA. And what happened was you had all these constituents in red states, people who tend to be the most hurt by this shit, recognize like, well, this is our healthcare. You can't do this. And so they started showing up at like all of these Republicans town halls and like kind of what you're seeing now a little bit, but it was one of the first times it really happened. So it truly blindsided them. And they just got excoriated. They got just mauled by their constituents. And these Republicans who had spent what about a decade at that point, like just gleefully waiting for the moment they could repeal the ACA, and that was the total intention. They went back and they saved it, and it was purely because of people coming out and making it happen. Now, I don't think that that's something that could happen in every instance, but it shows that it is something that has happened. That people can force a change, and I'd like to say you could continue to see that kind of impact, but now you're just seeing Republicans full on tell their congressmen and congresswomen don't hold town halls. Like so, they're not even interested anymore. I think now like the charade's over. Like they're not even playing the same game, let alone with the same rules anymore. So I think direct action is the only way. You know, I think hey, the governor in my adopted state is right. I think mass civil disobedience, mass unrest, like that's the thing that's going to change things. It's not going to be giving a 24-hour, 25-hour filibuster that ultimately doesn't do anything. It's not sitting on the Capitol steps, which doesn't do anything other than make sort of a nice show of quote unquote protest. I think it's, you got to make life difficult. You got to gum up the works. I mean, that's just, it's I don't know what else it can be. I think we're in a new territory. I think it's going to require a new game plan than what we've been accustomed to in the past. I don't think it's waving signs, wearing the same pink hats. Like these things don't, I don't know that those things necessarily worked a lot in the past. I know for sure they don't work anymore.
I actually got a couple more for you before we close here, man. I wanted to ask you, whenever you sit down to do a cartoon, did you ever get the cartoonist equivalent of writer's block, and how do you get it?
Yeah, for sure. A lot. I mean, like, all the time. I the most frustrating thing is when there's something that's happening, like there's some kind of important event or thing going on that I really like feel strongly about, but I just cannot figure the way to sort of penetrate it. I can't figure out the way to articulate it into a drawing, and that's the roughest thing because I know I really like I want to first and foremost I just want to document it. Like it's not about like checking a box like I got to get this drawing done today. It's more I just that was the intention with the daily drawings I was doing initially during the first term. It was the whole point of that project was an effort to document as much of what was happening as possible because I knew it would be just there'd be so much and so much of what was happening would eventually be forgotten because there's no way to remember all of it. Little did I know it'd be so much worse now, but so that's really it. I want to sort of for my own edification, for my own mind, I want to document as many of these things as possible. So that happens all the time. And I think the only thing I found as a workaround, and again, like everything else, it doesn't work all the time, is I just walk away. Like I won't, the more I try to force it, the farther away from it I get. And I'll have to go like do something else. I'll go take my dog for a walk or something, but I can't like, but yeah, writer's block happens. It happens all the time. All the time. Yeah.
How long does it take from conception to completion to create one of your cartoons?
It varies. You know, I mean, like I just did one, I don't know, like an hour before we jumped on this call. That was like 20 minutes, but that was most a lot of text and like not much to it. I tend to draw fast just because again, it's like I just have to get it done. If I'm doing one, there's sometimes I have like, even if I have the idea, fleshed out and I have to get it done. Sometimes I will try to slow myself down because I want to make sure I get it across as clearly as possible. And sometimes, so I would say generally it can take like, half hour to like say 2 hours. That's usually the low and the high end about.
One more thing before we go here, I wanted to ask you, can you give my audience some key advice if they want to follow in the same path as you and get into the world of, or art, doing art and cartooning?
Um, okay. I guess I would say, and I hesitate to say this as advice, so I don't know that it's good advice. It's just how I go about it. Never let go of your own particular style of how you want to put your vision out onto paper. Uh, all art, music, visual art, all it is communication. That's all it is. And any other person, the thing that gravitates them to the thing you're doing, whether it's a drawing, whether it's a song, is they're again sort of getting a window into what this other person is thinking or seeing. And the minute you invite sort of other influences in, or you start to take into consideration the audience too much, you lose that and it becomes less about, oh, you're not the thing that drew people in the first place becomes much more watered down, and instead you're sort of just delivering to an audience. So I would say that for me most fundamentally important is ignore the audience, draw for an audience of one, that person being yourself, for above and all. Like, I operate in a specifically political but also sort of sarcastic comedy sort of way. I'm only trying to make myself laugh. Like, that's it, right? And so I think that for me, if I could give any one piece of advice, it would be that draw for an audience of one, and that audience is you, because you know yourself, and so you're gonna know what you like. You're gonna know what you respond to, what you think is funny, what you appreciate. I think that's, if you do that, if you're really staying true to specifically what you value, what you like, whatever it is, whether you're doing work that's funny or not, you really can't go wrong. And nobody is so different that you're not going to find people who appreciate it, even if that's not really the goal. It's not, the goal isn't to have the other people appreciate it, but being appreciated is nice. So if that is your intention, if you just stick to what you want to do, it'll probably happen. I would imagine.
Well, there you have it, man. Thank you so much for being a guest. Thanks you for coming on the show, man. Thank you for what you do. I feel
Oh,
it's so incredibly important. Thank you so much, man. It was great
oh.
chatting with you. It's a pleasure is mine. Where can we find you at? Instagram?
Yeah, Instagram, unfortunately. The hashtag is Mr. Jesse Duquette, so I'm there. Threads as well. I'm on Blue Sky. I think that's just my name, Jesse Duquette, I think is what it is. But I also, because I have such a problematic relationship with these social media sites, I do have a Substack account, which I think is also just my name, Jesse Duquette. All these links are in the Instagram bio, but the thing about Substack is at least it's free from social media skeeviness and getting stuff shut down, shadow banning, all that stuff.
I'll make sure I get those links up, man. Jesse, you have a great night. Peace and love, bro. Keep it up.
Uh,
Keep up the great work.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, man. Peace and love.
Bye.